I feel like as technology is advancing, it's going to make what you're doing a lot less fringe. So, there was this neurofeedback training I did. I've done it a couple times. My husband's done it a few more times than I have. It's called BioCybernaut, and he has different reasons for going. You could work on a flow state, you could work on creativity, you can go there just for personal development, whatever it is. But when he's breaking down the brain waves, there's actually this brainwave called Schumann. I don't know if you've heard of it. So it's really low frequency, and not everyone has it, or at least to a detectable amount. And then if someone has a high level of Schumann, they tend to actually be able to communicate with animals and the earth. Like they just communicate with nature in a way that other people can't. So it's almost like tuning into a radio station that not everyone has available to them. So this is neuroscience. This is proven. He is one of the top people in the world conducting this research. And then we have AI now that is also depicting animal language to each other. So I forget which lab was doing it, but they were studying parrots, for example. And the mom parrot actually whispers a name to each of her babies, and each baby she will whisper it over and over until they learn their name. So you have mamas that are naming babies, and then babies that now have a sense of self. I am this name. And crows, we are learning, have a sense of self and even time, we're thinking, which is immense. Whales have different dialects, they speak different languages, they have art, which is music. They actually have entertainment, which we thought we're the only ones that do that. So we're learning about these really complex elements of what we thought were just, fluffy things with no soul. Now we have to question soul, conscientiousness. And for some people, that's going to sound crazy because we're like, of course they have it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're going to say, of course they don't. They're an animal. I, human, am so unique and so special. I'm the only one with these things. So I think it's going to be a beautiful thing I hope so. I think it's going to be a beautiful thing when it comes to things like factory farming. We're going to make different regulations for how we treat our animals, things like SeaWorld, different sea aquariums, zoos. We're going to say, I cannot believe I took this beautiful creature and put it in a cage and then charged money to have people come and take pictures with this drugged up animal, or this animal that is just like so depressed and has no idea what it's like to even hunt anymore. It's like, why am I existing? That we're gonna be like, that wasn't cool. What we were doing was pretty barbaric and evolved past it. And I think that we'll learn more about our own consciousness and what that means while we kind of uplift everything else in tandem.
Absolutely. I really believe in working together. I will be the first one to tell you I am not a veterinarian, I am not a scientist, but I am open to relationships with veterinarians, animal behavioralists, animal trainers. I am open to not only conversation, but assisting each other. I love working with veterinarians because I will hear something and it doesn't make sense to me. I did not do well in biology for what it's worth. I'll say, okay, this is where the pain's coming from. And the veterinarian can be like, okay, that makes sense because of this. So to me, working with veterinarians is the coolest thing because they can actually tell me what I'm seeing, and they can describe it. And they'll be like, oh, da da. And I'll be like, like it's very validating for me. I just did a TikTok on this a couple days ago about animals and names. And from what I hear from the spirit universe, whatever, is it's also a frequency, a sound frequency that they can talk to each other on. So, for instance, like I was saying something, or sorry, sound, or sorry, I haven't had coffee yet today. It's a smell.
Mm.
So they have, and I forget the exact number, and I think it varies based on the animal of like how many thousands of times more the smell that we do. And what I have found working, and I work primarily with cats and dogs because that's what people have, but I've seen this with horses as well, and even rabbits, where they are able to tell each other apart by smell. So they have a smell print, if you will, smell
Mm.
paw print, smell footprint, if you will, with each other. So they can recognize each other. It was really interesting this past summer. I There were several clients within like a 2-week period where their dogs were getting very hyper aggressive, and all of them were getting hyper aggressive with unneutered males, and then vice versa. The unneutered males were getting attacked. Um, so there is a smell thing there. The fascinating thing, I smiled when you said time, because I've seen this my entire career, if you will, with working with animals, is that they absolutely have a sense of time. They've proven that dogs can tell the passage of time based off of, again, smell, but again, based off of the lack of smell leaving. But what I've also found in the last few years is they can tell the passage of time based on seasons and weather. So, for instance, if you're going on a trip in the winter, uh, and or like in the fall, one way that I use to communicate that with the animals is they'll be back when more leaves are on the ground, and they have an instant recognition or understanding of what that is. I haven't played so much with the moon cycles, but it would be interesting to ask or kind of identify it by moon cycles. Right now, I'm just doing like based off of seasonality. They'll be back when there's more snow on the ground or whatever. But it's also interesting because let's say there's a storm coming, and you can say, okay, when those rains are done, your person will be back. And they seem to absolutely have an understanding. I also say, two sleeps or three dark, I'll use dark nights as the example. They'll be back in 3 dark nights, and they
I
seem
do
to,
that with my 4-year-old.
yeah. But animals,
Yeah,
cats, dogs, horses have that understanding and that consciousness of time. Now, how is it in their brains? That's a much bigger freaking question. But I've seen a lot of evidence, and not only that, I will tell you, one of my most powerful experiences was not even when I was actively working as an animal communicator, but I will never forget in my early, no, about 15 years ago, we were doing a whale watch off of Cape Cod, and I had my daughter was a baby, and I remember we had spotted some humpbacks and everyone's looking, and I was one of the few that was still on like one side of the boat, and I looked down at the water, and there was an eye staring at me of a humpback, and this beautiful creature was just staring at me, and they were probably only 10 feet away. And it was the most, I even like, even now I'm getting goosebumps because I remember looking at her, and it turned out to be the mama, and there was a calf, and I looked
Oh.
at her, and all of a sudden I had information, all of this information. She knew I was safe, she knew the boat was safe, she was annoyed about the sounds, like she had empathy. She understood why people were there, but she had this deep understanding that it's even hard to put into words about the world. And you go, how in the hell is that possible? And I don't know. It was so joyful in the first few weeks of COVID when everything shut down. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but all of a sudden marine life started springing back because shipping was, and this was again the very early COVID days, and
Mhm.
everything shut down, and all of a sudden marine life was coming back because there wasn't all the shipping and all the crap that were, I mean, the people were not putting crap in the water, people weren't going out on the water, and it was amazing how quickly they were starting to heal. They absolutely have a consciousness, and I say this a lot, is I really feel part of my calling is to just let people know that pets, animals have thoughts and feelings and are autonomous beings. And I think a lot of the pushback I get is because if we accept that animals are autonomous beings, that they have thoughts and feelings and a consciousness all their own, then we have to address not only how we treat them, because in the US and abroad, we do not have protection. We do not have laws for animal abuse that are they're aggressive, but it's very hard to prosecute. Not only do we have to address how we treat them, but we have to address eating them. And those are two huge things that
Mhm.
have been accepted for hundreds of years, that we can treat an animal like crap because they don't have thoughts and feelings, and we can eat them. So you can look at someone like me and say BS, because if you opened your, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, but I think a lot of the pushback is then we have to address that, and you have to address things that you've done.
Mhm.
And I will say, and I did a TikTok like a year and a half ago, and I couldn't believe how much of a response I got. And it was just me like in between sessions going, your pets don't blame you for stuff you did when you were kids. Because when you're a kid, you're gonna do silly stuff. You're gonna try and keep your dog in your bedroom with you when you're sleeping. You're going to, as my son did to my cat, put OxyClean on her to try and clean her.
Oh,
You're going to
no.
yeah, she's safe. You're gonna do stuff that you're not so proud of, and
Mhm.
that's okay. When you are children, animals seem to have this unique understanding that your brain isn't fully formed because it's not.
Mhm.
So that's a little different. However, if you have been cruel to animals, I'm not talking about eating them, but if you've been cruel to animals, I'm very threatening because I absolutely will hear. And I actually got a question not too long ago. Have you ever talked to someone that was abusing animals? And I said, absolutely not. No one that has seriously abused an animal, and I'm not talking about as a kid when they accidentally fall off your bed, no one that seriously abused an animal is going to talk to me
Mm.
because they know
Mhm.
they're scared. What if? Well, then you have to deal with the fact that you hurt them.
Mhm. Yeah, there was this lady in Florida and her TikTok went viral, so she ended up getting caught, and I don't think she did jail time. I think she ended up getting sentenced to 5 years probation, but she found a raccoon stuck in a dumpster, and she decided to light it on fire. And she afterwards, she just, like, doubled down and was, like, trying to make it this funny thing, and the judge was like, "This is extremely concerning. Like, if you were able to do this to a defenseless animal, then that says a lot about you, your character, and what the danger you pose to other people even." And I was like, "Whoa, thank," like, that was an awesome judge. Like, she was recognizing this is cruel, unusual, and absolutely not okay. And there's something almost more terrifying about someone who's willing to hurt an animal because of its defenselessness, kinda like a child, and I think that's why in psychology, it's like when you look at serial killers, for example, you're like, "Well, they started with animals, and that's not good." Like, if you're able to do that, that's not good, and it shows kind of a lack of empathy, obviously, and then also if you wanna get into more of the esoteric, lack of a soul, lack of a inner moral compass
You
or
know,
something
I
like
find
that.
it a lot in in abusive families. I will, and this is generally after the fact. I can't think of one off the top of my head where they were still actively with their partner, but it's generally after they've been with a partner and they want to know how. Like generally, they've suspected that they did something, and so they're coming to me to ask what actually happened. And 7 times out of 10, it's not good. Sometimes and again, abuse can be many forms, just like with people, right? You can
Mhm,
have abuse as just being ignored. Like a lot of times it's just, well, he ignored me, they ignored me. But to an animal, a cat or a dog that is dependent on you for food, water, shelter, love, if you're ignoring them, that's just as bad as if in my opinion, it's just as bad as if you were doing it to a child. They need, and I'm not talking about you have to sit and have full-blown conversations, although you absolutely can, but just if you're just absolutely ignoring them, then you are out of sight, out of mind.
mhm,
Uh, so it could be as little as ignoring, or it could be, them yelling at them and or putting them in other rooms and all this stuff. And it's interesting. Primarily, my clients are women. Why
mhm.
is that?